Okay, I think we'll just proceed. So, good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Morning Market Review. Right. So, without wasting much of our time, we're just going to dive into it. Right. So, first, we're going to be treating Forest Factory to see the major fundamentals we have coming up for today. So, today is Thursday. Right, yes. So today is Thursday, the 17th of August, and we have quite a number of high and medium impact news. I'm going to remove my filter for low impact news and just apply this filter. Right, so for today, the major news we're going to be looking at is the unemployment claims from the US by 1:30, and we have the Philly Fed Manufacturing Index coming out by 1:30 also. If you are if you a night crawler, you would have taken advantage of the news, the unemployment change and the unemployment rate from the AUD zone, unemployment change and unemployment rate from the AUD zone. If you had stayed up at night to trade the AUD, right? So that being said, that move has gone. So we're looking towards USD. But of course, we should still have a little bit of push. We'd also look at the charts to see um the effect of the unemployment change and the employment change and the unemployment rate, what the effect was on the AUD on the chart. All right, so let's quickly just dive into it. Let's go to our chart. For this morning, we are treating mostly the dollar pair, and let's see if we could still take advantage of some of the AUD pair. Let's see if we could still take advantage of some of the AUD pair. Okay, so as at this morning, we saw this major move, right? This major move, I think this was as a result of that news came out by 2:30. So let's see, this is midnight and this is around 4 p.m. So as at 2 o'clock when the news came out on the AUD, okay, this is uh Australia to 200. That is Australian stock. I'm looking for the AUD pair. AUD, okay, perfect. AUD USD. So I think that their unemployment change came out negative for the AUD, right? So and also their uh employment data also came employment change and unemployment data came out negative. So you could see this major push down. So for today, you're mostly going to be expecting a weak AUD. So if you're going to be taking any stance against the AUD, you most likely will be looking at selling of the AUD, right? And of course, you'd also need to confirm from your currency strength meter to give you a proper overview of the strength of each of these currency to better. Okay, so currency strength meter, I use currency strength meter from Baby Pips. Currency strength meter from Baby Pips. Right. So on a daily time frame, you could see okay, so AUD is currently the weakest currency. AUD is currently the weakest currency. We have the strongest one being CAD, not so strong though, but it's the strongest of the pair. Then we have your Swiss franc. We have the GBP follows next. Okay, GBP has spiked up. We have the euro, the USD is also weak, and NZD, and then AUD. So if at all I'm going to be taking any trade, and if at all I'm going to be taking any trade, uh as pertaining to the AUD, I'm mostly going to be selling off the AUD because of the weakness in the AUD at this point in time, right? So for USD, we actually have a news coming up today, right? We have a news coming up by 1:30. So a pair like AUD USD, I might not want to take such an instrument. So let's look at AUD JPY. AUD JPY, we have price bouncing off a support zone. I think we have more of what we call a retracement at this point. Price is being retraced off this point. But I'm still looking at, let's look at AUD JPY as our first pair. We'll look at three AUD pair, and then we'll look at USD pair, US index, commodities, and then we draw the session to a close. So for AUD JPY, looking at the structure here on the chart, you can see that price has actually been gotten to this support zone. It got rejected from this support, right? It got rejected from this support, headed up to this resistance point. I'd want to put my RSI because this buy actually went, it was more of a strong buy. So I'd want to add my RSI, that's my relative strength index. Adding my relative strength index, I have this, okay? So from my relative strength index, you see price has almost approached 70, right? I was looking at a possibility where there might be a continuous buy. But looking at this structure, this point here has actually been a very, very strong resistance for price. It used to be a support for price. So now it's serving as a resistance for price. And most likely because we don't have any fundamental and the fundamental against the fundamental at this moment is currently against the AUD. I'm most likely going to be looking for a sell, right? I'm most likely going to be looking for a sell, selling off from this point. Yeah. So I'm looking at price bouncing off this resistance point, coming back down to this support, right? So you most likely will see AUD JPY trade in between this region, right? So am I going for an instant sell, put my stop loss at around this point, just above the fake out of this point here? Let me give my stop loss a unique color. Let's say make that okay, let's make the stop loss red and make the take profits green. Yes, just like it is on our MT4. Let's make the take profit green like it is on our MT4. So great. So I'm most likely going to be going for an instant sell, right? I'm going to stop my loss at around this point and then take my profit before the next support. So if you look at it, my risk to reward ratio is quite high, right? This is what I'm willing to risk on this trade. This is what I'm willing to risk on this trade. I'm willing to risk 7 points as to 31 points, which is as to 31 pip. I'm willing to risk 7 pip as to 31 pip that I'll be making on this trade. So it's a fair deal. So if I enter at an instant market price, at the instant market price, I would be able to ride the market back down to this support and having my stop loss at this point should it go against me, right? So that's my take for AUD JPY. So entering at instant market, at the instant market price, putting my stop loss at 93.772. 93.772. Enter at instant market at the instant market price or current market price, and put my stop loss at 93772. Then of course take my profit at 93393. 93.393. Current market price, my entry. Take my stop my loss at 93.772, then take my profit at 93.393. 93.393. I believe you can all see my screen. I want to be sure that everybody can see my screen. Right? If you can see my screen, just drop me a yes in the chat session so I know that everybody is following. Okay, perfect. Perfect. All right. All right. So that's my take for AUD JPY. That's my take for AUD JPY. Let's look at another AUD pair. I told you we're going to be looking at 3 AUD pair. So another AUD pair we're looking at is Euro AUD. Let's see. Euro AUD is currently bouncing off this resistance point, right? I want to be giving us trade with less risks, more reward. So my strategy this morning is going to be I'm going to be putting into consideration my risk to reward ratio. My risks to reward ratio. I want to ensure that for any trade I'm taking, my risks should not be more than what I'm willing to make on that trade. What I'm willing to make on that trade. So this is Euro AUD. This is Euro AUD. So you could see that Euro AUD actually hits this resistance point as a result of the weakness of the AUD. It pushed Euro, it gave the Euro a little bit of a boost against the AUD. It gave the Euro a little bit of a boost against the AUD. So what I'm expecting is that price retracing of this resistance should come back to this support before continuing this uptrend. And you can see that area USD, if you put it on a 4-hour time frame, is that it has actually been on an uptrend, right? It has actually been on an uptrend, right? So I'm looking at price retracing down to this support before continuing that trend. Price retracing down to this support before continuing that trend. So how do you take advantage of that? I most likely some person will say, okay, why not going for an instant sell down to this support? Yes, you could go in for an instant sell down to this support, but you will be trading against the trend, right? If you do that, you'll be trading against the trend. So there's every possibility that if there is a sharp reversal of the trend, right? If there's a sharp reversal of the trend, you might be caught in the crossfire, right? If the if the trend now starts going in the actual direction of the price, starts going in the actual direction of the trend, you might be caught in the crossfire. So rather than going in for a sell, and if I'm going in for a sell, look at how many people I'll be making on this particular instrument. I'm making roughly around 36 pip compared to sell. And you know, the best logic is to sell right at the highest point, and then you buy at the lowest point. Sell at the highest point, you buy at the lowest point. So at this point here where price is, I most likely would wait for price to come to the lowest point, which is the support here, right? I want price to come to the lowest point, which is the support here, before I go in for a buy. My preference on this instrument is still a buy, right? It's still a buy. So that will now be determinant on if this point. So I'm having two buy entries in mind. My first buy entry will be to put my buy limit, right? This time I want to use buy limit. I want to put a buy limit, right, at this point here before the support. Let me change the color of that. Let me change the color of that. This will be, let me give it, because it's a limit, let me give it a, what color is this? Okay. Let me just give it a pink, right? Or magenta, right? So I want to put my buy limits before the support here, indicating that as soon as price sells down to this point, it should pick me up on a buy. And then once it starts retracing off that support, I'm going to be pushed into profit, right? So it comes all the way down, pick me from this point. So this is going to be a buy limit, picks me up from this point, right? And then as soon as price start retracing off that support, I'm definitely going to be making profit. And then of course my take profit point will be before the next resistance at the top. My take profit will be before the next resistance at the top. Let me give that a green line. Take profit in green. So my take profit is going to be before the next resistance at the top. So my buy limit at the top, at the bottom here, going for a buy limit at the bottom here, taking my profit at this point here, right? So in a scenario where price does not come down to trigger your buy limit, right? Definitely, that will mean that price has actually formed a weak support at around this point. It means price has formed a weak support at around that point. It means price has formed a weak support at around that point. In a scenario where this candle closes and it's not able to close below this point, it simply means price has formed a weak support at around that point. So you could still go in for a buy. My preference is still a buy. Don't forget the AUD is completely weak. It's the weakest currency for today, right? So I would still want to go in for a buy in favor of the euro, right? So if this forms a weak support, I'll go in for a buy. The only thing is on this particular trade now, I'll be targeting lesser pip in profit compared to when price. Please mute your mic, please mute your mic so you don't distract the class, right? So I'll be targeting a lesser amount of profit compared to when price comes down to trigger my buy limit. So it's either you're going in for a buy, right, an instant buy as soon as this candle closes and you get the rejection from this point, you could go in for an instant buy. But if price retraces down to this point here, so you also have clear opportunity. So my buy limit to be at price level 1 point. My buy limit to be at price level 1.69664. 1.69664. 1.69664. Right? 1.69664. That's where I would have my buy limit, right? That's where I would have my buy limit. And then I'll put my take profit at 1.70426. 1.70426. Of course, I'd have my stop loss should price break below, because this point now, which was serving as a resistance for price here and here, that was serving as a resistance for price, is now serving as a support. So of course, if price breaks below that point, I'd want to just bring my stop loss. So you could put your stop loss anywhere within this region. You don't necessarily need to put your stop loss. You don't necessarily need to put your stop loss on this point. So anywhere in between this region. So within your buy limit, just few pips after your buy limit, but the best thing is to put it below that support, right? The best thing is to put it below that support. So my support at that point is this is where my support is though, which used to be a resistance. So my support is around there. So you could put your stop loss below that point. So at 1.69405, 1.69405, you could have your stop loss at around that point. Have your stop loss at around that point. So a buy limit, you're going in for a buy limit, right? You're expecting that price would come down, trigger your buy limit, and then as soon as price is rejected from that your support zone, that will give you profit up until your resistance point at the top. But of course, you want to put your take profit before the resistance, right? So a most preferable take profit point to be at 1.70426, 1.70426. So that's my take for Euro AUD. Let's look for one more AUD pair. Let's look for one more AUD pair. AUD pair. Yes, we have a AUD card. Let's look at AUD card. Let's look at AUD card. So same thing played out for AUD card. We have this very downward move as a result of the negative effect of the news on the AUD zone, right? So same thing is going to still play out. I still expect that the card and looking at let's look at that currency strength meter again. Let's look at where card is on the currency strength meter. So card is currently the strongest pair, right? And it might still continue to retain its strength up until when the news on the dollar actually comes out. This is on a daily time frame, right? My currency strength meter is on the daily time frame, so it's giving us an overall view of what the currency might actually look like for the rest of the day, right? So, and it moves in real time. Don't forget, it moves in real time. So of course you expect each currencies to actually drop and rise based on demand and supply in the market at every point in time, or based on the chart at every point in time, right? So I still expect that CAD should still be stronger compared to the AUD. So my preference for this instrument should still be a sell, right? My preference for this instrument will still be a sell. And though AUD card has actually been ranging for a while, it has been ranging in between these points, right? It has been ranging in between these points here and here. So today we actually had a breakout. After price range in this region for roughly around almost a month, right? Price has been ranging in between this region for a month, and now we have a breakout. So of course, same thing with the previous instrument. I wouldn't want to go in for a buy following this retracement up to this point, right? I wouldn't want to go in for an instant buy up to this following this retracement up to this point. I would want price to get to this point here, right? I'd like that. I would wait for price to rest on my resistance point before taking a sell, continuing that since price has broken below this support, so there's every possibility it will be heading down to the next support. Let's see where we have the next support. Let's look at a 4-hour time frame. Okay, we can't get the next support in the 4 hours. Let's look at a daily time frame also. Okay, so the next support is somewhat around here. This is the next notable support on. Let's bring this down a bit. So this is the next notable support on AUD card, and we could find that on a daily time frame. So if you're going back to your 1 hour time frame and you zoom in a little, you could see okay, let's go back to that daily time frame. Okay, so back to the daily time frame. Yes, so the next notable support is somewhat around here. somewhat around here. Okay, so let's go back to our 1 hour time frame. Okay, perfect. And zoom in a little bit. Okay, so the next notable support is at price level 0.85895, 0.8585895. That's the next notable support. So I still expect that price should come and rest on that support, right? So, but having this retracement at this point, I expect price will get to this point and then push back to this support zone since it has broken this point where it has been ranging for a while. So I'd want to use a sell limit. I don't want to use a sell limit. I would want to use a sell limit, ensuring that price, before price gets to this resistance, it triggers my sell. And then as soon as price starts pushing back down, I have I start making profits on my sell, taking my profits before. So you could do this. You could put either your first take profit at this point here. You could have your first take profit at this point here, or stretch your take profit down to this point, right? So you could let me use this as my entry. Let me use something like pink as my entry to just differentiate that. Okay, so I'd want to enter at around this point here, using a sell limit. So once price goes up to my resistance points, triggers my sell, and once it is rejected from that point, it goes all the way back down. So you could target here as your first take profit and then here as your second take profit. So my sell limit to be at price level 0.86784, 0.86784, 0.86784. I'm going for a sell at around that point, and then take my profit. My first take profit will be at 0.86336, 0.86336, 0.86336. Or I could stretch my take profit down before the next support at 0.85961, 0.85961, 0.85961. Then my stop loss, of course, if price breaks above this point here, if price breaks above this point, there is no need holding. If it triggers your sell and then keeps going up, price breaks above this resistance point, then it will just be advisable for you to cut your sell out, your sell position out. At you could put your stop loss at around price level 0.87035, 0.87035. My preference on this instrument, like I said, is a sell. My preference on this instrument is a sell, right? So let's look at that's for AUD pair. We've looked at AUD pair. We've looked at AUD pair. Now let's look at the dollar pair, since we have news coming out on the dollar by 130. Since we have news on the dollar by 130, let's look at the dollar pair. So we'll start from the dollar index, USD IDX. So currently this morning, you might actually have USD IDX range. You've had this morning we've had USD IDX actually hit a resistance point at the top. I think this is the highest point that the USD IDX has gotten to in a long time, and you could see this consistent uptrend. Last month we had a very, very poor outcome on the dollar, but this month has been looking very, very favorable for the dollar. We've been having consistent higher high on the dollar. So the USD IDX is the dollar against a basket of other currency, and we've had consistent higher highs on the dollar so far. So I'm expecting a little bit of a retracement since that news will be coming out by 130. I'm expecting a ranging market up until 130. So an instrument like USD IDX, right? USD IDX, you might actually get a ranging market, right? So since we're going to be expecting a ranging market, the best strategy would be to trade a breakout, right? Trade a breakout. So, and that breakout will be determinant on the effect of the news. That breakout will be determinant on the effect of the news. So I wouldn't want to trade in between this region. I wouldn't want to take a trade in between this region. Let's look at a 15 minutes time frame. right? A 15 minutes time frame is tempting for you to say, okay, let's take a buy up until this point, right? It's very tempting for you to say, let's take a buy from here down to this point. Let's see how many pip that will be. Let's see if it would, because I also want to see what's the profitability of that trade. This is about 18 pip, right? 18 pip. Is it a profitable trade? Yes, it's a profitable trade though. If you're looking at taking a short-term trade, a very short trade this morning, you could trade the fact that price is bouncing off this support down to this resistance point, right? So you could go in at instant market price, right? So if you're looking at it, looking at candlestick formation, the Japanese candlestick formation, you can see that price has actually formed a price piercing with my bullish confirmation candle, right? So there's every possibility that price will buy up until this resistance. So my candlestick formation has given me confirmation for a buy in this run. My candlestick formation has given me a confirmation for a buy. This is on a 15 minutes time frame. So this one is going to be a shorter trade. This is a 15 minutes time frame, so it's going to be a shorter trade. So I'm seeing every indication for a buy here. My price piercing with my bullish confirmation candle, expressing that price will push up to my resistance point. So I could go in for an instant buy, right? Put my take profit before the resistance point, right? So I'm putting my instant buy, putting my take profit at the before the resistance point. So you could put your take profit at around 103.438, 103.438, 103.438. I put my take profit at around there and have my stop loss below that support. I could have my stop loss below that support. So this is one support. This is another support here. So I want to go below this support at the bottom here, right? Below the support at the bottom here. So you could have your stop loss. Let me put my stop loss in red. Put my stop loss at price level 103.122. 103.122, right? You could adjust your stop loss if you feel that stop loss is too close, but it's a short trade. And of course, because it's a short trade, you wouldn't be making so much if you don't use a good amount of volume on that trade, right? You wouldn't be making so much if you don't use a good amount of volume on that trade. So my entry, you could enter at instant market price at the current market price, and then you take profit again at 103.438. Stop your loss at 103.122. So that's my take for USD IDX for a 15 minutes time frame. So after that, you can now sit and watch out for what the news is actually going to come, since that's going to be by 1:30, right? So the news is actually going to be a major determinant of how the market reacts. If it is going to break, don't forget we are trading in between this zone, right? This thing now is in between this zone. So expecting that price will range in between this zone, right, until the news comes out by 1:30. So you could still take advantage of this zone, trading in between it, right? So that's just that for USD IDX. Let's look at another USD pair. Let's look at another USD pair. Okay. You could drop suggestions, USD pairs, please. You drop your suggestions. So let's look at GBP USD, then we'll look at Euro USD. Right, GBP USD, then we'll look at Euro USD. So for GBP USD, we've actually had, let's look at the currency strength meter again. GBP USD, let's see where GBP currently is. So GBP, okay, GBP is low. We had USD currently down, right? We had USD, when we checked the previous time, we had USD lower than the GBP, but of course we're expecting news on the USD, so it's expected that the USD gain a little bit of strength based on sentiment. It's expected that the USD gain a little bit of strength. So for USD, for GBP USD, I expect that, let's see, price has actually been buying for a while. I want to see if price has gotten to, so in a scenario where you come to the chart and you see that price has actually been buying for a while, right, heading towards this resistance point, I want to be sure that price has not gotten to an oversold region. And don't forget, GBP USD charts can be a little bit tricky. There are some minor resistance that you need to, like, look at here. Now we had a resistance before this one at the top here, before this major one at the top here. So if you were not very watchful, you would have just jumped in for an outright buy. You will have just jumped in for an outright buy, and price gets rejected at this point here. And don't forget, your support and resistance zone they are zones, not a straight line. So the fact that you had this resistance around here doesn't necessarily mean that price will get here again before it is rejected. So like it is now, price has already approached that zone, and you could see this rejection play out, right? You could see this rejection actually play out in the market. So what I'd want to do to be on the safe side, let's go to a 15 minutes time frame, since we are looking at quick end trade before the news. So on a 15 minutes time frame, you could see more, or you could get clearer details. On a 15 minutes time frame, you could get clearer details, right, as to what you the 1 hour time frame will not give you. So on a 15 minutes time frame, we have here we have more of a long leg doji. This is more of a long leg doji, right? Yeah, more of a long leg doji. You could see it almost it opened and almost closed at the same point, then with a very long wick, right? Then we've had a lot of bearish pressure in the market. So at this point, I would also want to add in my RSI. To see the strength of buyers and sellers in the market. I want to know if where's my relative strength index? Okay. All right, so I want to add in my RSI. So you could see that price has actually got into an overbought region, and it is retracing off that overbought region. So the bearish pressure in the market has actually fizzled out. So I'm looking at going in for most likely a sell. And we have news coming out on the dollar. So I expect that my preference on this instrument is going to be a sell. My preference on this instrument is going to be a sell on a 15 minutes time frame. So same thing, I'd want to go in for a sell. Looking at this point here, like I said, GBP USD can be very tricky. If you're not very watchful, you would go in for a sell, or you would put your price at wrong point. So looking at this point here, there was a minor rejection at around here. So you wouldn't want to go in for an instant sell, and you can see that that's why price is currently struggling at around that point. So you want to go in for a sell if price breaks below that point. So you want to go in for a sell once price breaks below 1.27306, right? So you need to be very watchful for those little rejection points. If you're not watchful or mindful of those little rejection points, you might get trapped. Right, you might get trapped on a resistance or get trapped on a support, right? So I want to go in for a sell once price is able to break below that point. Once price is able to break below that point, I go in for my sell down to this support zone, right? So that point is at price level 1.27306, 1.27306. I'm going for a sell at around that point, and you see price is almost struggling to break there. So once it's able to break below that point, you ride your sell down to, of course, you take your profit before this support zone at price level 1.37111, right? You want to ensure that you take your profit before that support zone at price level 1.27111, right? You take your profit before then, so you could have your stop loss above this point here. Of course, this is my take profit. So let me change the entries. Let me change the color rather, so you get a clearer understanding. So I'm looking at going in once price breaks below this point. I think I've been using magenta for that. Let me continue with my magenta, and then my take profit before this point here. My take profit before this point, right? And then I'm going to be stopping my loss once price breaks above this point. Once price breaks above this point, I'll stop my loss at price level 1.27453. 1.27453. 1.27453. I'll just stop my loss at around that point. So if you notice my risk to reward ratio, how much will I be making if I'm going in for? So this is about 20 points. This is about 20 pip compared to about 13 pip. It's not really a very, very profitable trade, but it's still worth a shot. You still have an edge of about 7 pip, right? An edge of about 7 pip. So because it's a short trade on a 15 minutes time frame, of course, use reasonable lot size proportional to your account, right? Proportional to your account. So always ensure that you put in good risk to reward ratio and good money management technique when you're placing your trades, to ensure that you don't over risk or you don't overstake all your eggs in one basket. You understand? So let's look at Euro USD. Let's look at Euro USD. Euro USD on a daily time frame, of course, because of the strength in the dollar, we've had this fall in price for Euro USD. We've had this fall in price for Euro USD, and it has actually rested on this support zone. Right? It has actually rested on this support zone. So most likely this is on a daily time frame. So definitely the news for today would to a large extent determine if this trend will still continue, right? Or if there's going to be a reversal of trend, right? So the news to a large extent coming out today will determine if there's going to be a continuation of the trend or there's going to be a reversal or a retracement. But at this point, we are looking at entering in, let's go to the 1 hour time frame. On the 1 hour time frame, you could see that price is actually retracing off this support. Let's see. Okay, so we have this support at around this point. Let me see the last time price got to that point. Okay, so the last time price got to that point was around the 7th of July. 7th of July, that was the last time price got to that point, and that point has actually held its weight for price, held its weight on the 5th of July also, and around the 3rd of July. So you could see that that point is actually a good support point for price. That point is actually a good support point for price. So that's why you're having that retracement this morning. Well, I don't expect that retracement to break above this resistance point, right? So currently price is struggling we have a resistance point here, and then we have another resistance at around this point. So we have two resistance, one at around here, where price is currently struggling to break above, and then another one where at this point here, right? So I'm expecting that, okay, so this is my take, right? I'm expecting that price would get rejected from this point because, of course, we have news coming out on the dollar, and of course, positive sentiment would most likely see that Euro USD actually push down. Sentiment around the dollar would at least see that Euro USD pushes down and range in between these points. Right? So since I'm expecting that price would range in between this point at around price level 1.08829, price level 1.08829 to around price level 1.08607. So this price is going to range in between that point. So the best thing for me to do is to go to a smaller time frame. So I'm going to a 15 minutes time frame to get a clearer view, right? So I've checked on a 1 hour time frame. I could see that there is a rejection point, right? But I want to go to a smaller time frame to see the candlestick formation at around that point to see if truly that is a retracement, right? So, and if you're looking at the candlestick pattern here, you have your price piercing, right? You have your price piercing, right? And then you have your bearish confirmation candle. You have your price piercing and your bearish confirmation candle. So every indication for you to go in for a sell on a 15 minutes time frame, every indication for you to go in for a sell, right? I'm going in for a sell. You could do looking at it, you could do instant sell, but be wary about this point here. You have a little bit of a rejection at around here, right? You have a little bit of a rejection at around here. But going in for a sell, either you go in for a sell at the current market price or you wait for price to break below here. So this is a weak support. So there's every possibility that the sentiment around the dollar would push price past that support, since that support is a weak support, right? So there's every possibility price might actually push below that point because there's more volatility on the USD, pushing Euro USD down. So I'd want to just take it on an instant sell. I want to take it on an instant sell. Of course, take my profit before this point here. Take my profit before this point, before my support zone, right? So I'd go in instant sell, take profit at 1.08632. I put my take profit at around there, and of course I stop my loss should price break above my resistance at the top here. Should price break above my resistance point, then I most likely wouldn't be holding on to that trade again. So I have my stop loss at around here. Let me give it a red, right? So my stop loss will be at price level 1.08632. 1.0886, 1.0886, yeah, 1.08886. So I'd have my stop loss at around that point. So should price break above that point, then you just cut your losses and move on. So like I said, this is a 15 minutes time frame and it's a short trade, right? So you're calculating, if you had entered at the current market price, you're calculating roughly around 15 pip in profit. Euro USD is not a very, very profitable instrument. So of course, if you're using a very good lot size, a standard lot on Euro USD will be giving you about $10 per pip movement. So you should do your math. So $10 per pip movement, that's roughly around $10 times 15. That should be giving you $150. $150 on a standard lot is not a bad trade, right? $150 on a standard lot. And if you have the capital, of course, you could push it to standard lots. That will be giving you roughly around $300, right? And that's what's the trade for this morning. So good, if you intend using 0.01, you most likely wouldn't be making something significant from this trade, right? Right. So that's just it. Okay. All right. So okay, let's look at the next instrument. Let's look at USD JPY. Let's look at USD JPY. So for USD JPY has gotten to the highest point it has gotten to in a while, right? Highest point it has gotten to in a while. And just like every other currency against the dollar, you've been seeing everything in favor of the dollar, right? I still expect this uptrend to continue, but before that trend continues, we most likely will be seeing a little bit of a retracement. Of course, like I say, always trade with the trend. Don't let the trend be your friend, right? And you could see that at this point here, my stochastic is also supporting in for a buy in favor of the dollar. Price has approached my oversold region. It has been selling for a while. Let me zoom in a little. So this little sell here made price actually push down to my oversold region. And of course, as soon as price gets to 20, you're no longer considering a sell trade anymore. You're no longer considering a sell trade anymore. So you should be looking in for a buy, pushing up to my 80 stochastic level, right? Pushing up to my 80 stochastic level. So that being said, what I'm most likely going to be expecting is price retracing down to this support zone, right? Price retracing down to this support zone. So I'm going to be using more of a limit on USD JPY to be on the safer hand. This is on the 1 hour time frame though. Let's go to a 15 minutes time frame to see if we have a clearer, if we have shorter trades. Okay, so on a 15 minutes time frame, I'm seeing that there is another support at around here. Seeing that there's another support at around there. And don't forget, my preference is actually a buy, right? Should price get rejected from this point in favor of the dollar, actually just following the trend, in favor of the dollar, just following the trend, right? I'm expecting more of a buy. And also, let's confirm that from, you see, I'm going through a whole lot of this thing just to verify what is what. The currency strength meter, I'm using my stochastic to see if it has gotten to overbought, oversold. So currently you have JPY being strong, you have USD also not as strong as the JPY though. But like I said, JPY on its own is it can be strong because it's a producing based economy. But because of the news coming out on the dollar, I don't expect the dollar to remain at this level for today, right? I still expect, so like I said, it's determinant on the news. The strength of the dollar will be determinant on the news. So if the news comes out positive, right, you most likely will see the dollar push to the top. And then if it comes out negative, you might see dollar fall further down, right, by some percentage, right? But there's always this sentiment around the dollar whenever there's a news coming out. People are expecting that something good is going to come out of the news and all of that, right? So that's why you most likely will see the dollar gain a little bit of strength even before the news comes out, right? So I'm going to be expecting that there be a retracement from this point, right? Price has been trading in between this region. This is on a 15 minutes time frame. I wouldn't want to go to a smaller time frame. Let's look at a 5 minutes time frame though. Let's look at the 5 minutes time frame. Okay, this is on a 5 minutes time frame, right? But this trade is actually going to be very short. Let's see how many people. I want to be sure that it's a profitable trade. This is roughly around 26 25 pip on USD JPY. It's still a fair trade. 25 pip on a 5 minutes time frame. And also let's consider USD JPY. Let's also consider the spread USD. So the spread is just 2 pip on USD JPY. So it's still a fair trade. If I'm targeting 25, if I'm targeting roughly around 25 pip from here to this point, if I'm targeting roughly around 25, 30 pip, and I'm to pay those 2 pip in spread, right? It's still a fair trade. So I'm going to be using a sell limit, a buy limit rather, a buy limit. I stand corrected, a buy limit. So if price gets to this point, because you could see this rejection has played out here, and then it's most likely going to do the same thing when it gets to this point. So should price get to this point, you could do an instant buy. Normally what I do once price has already almost approached a support is that I buy at that point, right? I buy at that point, especially in a scenario where the news is coming out in favor of the dollar, right? I just buy at that point. Or you could just wait for price to get to rest on that support, and then from the next candle, once you get a rejection on the next candle, you can now go in for a buy, right? It's still fine, right? But just ensure that if you're buying at around this point here, put your stop loss below the support zone. So you would have your stop loss at around 146.161, 146.161, 146.161. You could put your stop loss at around that place, right? Could put your stop loss at around that place. So yes, stochastic has gotten to that oversold region. So I expect that once it gets to that point, it has not fully rested on the oversold region. There's still a little bit of room for it to sell, which you can see on the chart. So it most likely will sell to this support. And if it is not able to break this support, you might now see a rejection from that point. So you could put your buy limit on this support zone, expecting that once price hits that point, you now going for a buy. Once there's a rejection from that point, you can now go in for a buy. So this candle is actually going to be closing at around, this is 8:45. 8:45. So 8:45. We could just wait a few minutes. This is 8:40, 8:45, right? So the next candle will be opening by 8:50, right? 8:50. So once that candle is able to, once the next candle closes, once this candle closes and is not able to close below the support, you can now go in for your buy. Of course, you could stretch if you're doing this, you discover that your risk to reward ratio is actually going to be higher. So you could afford to bring your stop loss down in case of a fake out, so that price doesn't hit your stop loss and start retracing. So you could afford to bring your stop loss down. So I'm calculating how many people in loss. So this is going to be just 6 people in loss, and then you could decide to take profit, stretch it up until this point, 32 people in profit. That's quite a good risk to reward. If you ask me, that's quite a good risk to reward. Right. So the next candle has opened, and let's see, once that rejection plays out, you could go in for your buy. Right. Once this candle closes bullish, this is a 5 minutes time frame. So you know you're not going to have to wait for too long. You're not going to have to wait for too long to get your answer. So once this candle closes, the current candle closes now and it is bullish, of course, you go in for your buy up until this resistance point. So I'd want to take my profit at around here, right? I can stretch my take profit up to this point. So I'm going to give this a green. So I want to stretch my take profit up until this point at 146.468. 146.468. So I have my stop loss at 146.126, and then take my profit at 146.468, right? So let's see, the rejection is even playing out, but I'd want a confirmation here whereby I wait for this candle to close bullish. I'd want my confirmation hereby waiting for this candle to close bullish. That would be my confirmation. So that's for USD JPY. That's my take for USD JPY. So let's look at USD CHF. Let's look at USD CHF. I think for USD CHF, The same thing is playing out here. You could quickly key into this rejection point, right? You could see that price has gotten to this support and it is being rejected. So let's go to a smaller time frame to see where we could go in for a good entry. So for USD CHF, of course, you could go in for an instant buy at this point in time. You could go in for an instant buy on USD CHF. There's been several rejections. You have your hammer at your support zone. You have your spinning top at your support zone, and your candle is currently forming bullish. So you could go in for an instant buy on USD CHF, right? Putting your stop loss somewhere around here. Okay, let me use this line for my stop loss. Of course, I want to take my profit before the resistance at the top. Have my stop loss at around here, right? So one thing for USD CHF, you could see this wide gap. That wide gap is your spread, right? That wide gap is your spread. So if you're going to be taking this instrument, you need to use a better lot size so that even if you're paying up this in spread, you'll still be making a reasonable amount of money. It's going to be a very short trade, but if you know how to play your way around your lot size, you'll still be able to make something from it. But ensure you have your stop loss at 0.879 0.87908. Take your profit at 0.88060. So you could go in for an instant buy on USD CHF. All right, so let's look at gold. Let's look at gold. So gold is a very reactive instrument to the dollar. You might see gold actually trade quietly today. You might see gold actually trade quietly today up until when the news comes out. You might see gold actually trade quietly today, right? So let's look at on a 30 minutes time frame. You could see that price is actually being retraced, is being rejected from here, which is a resistance point, right? So my preference for gold this morning, if you look at it on a 15 minutes time frame, if you look at it on a 30 minutes time frame, you could see this rejection, but on a 15 minutes time frame, you could see a clearer picture, right? You have that same rejection, but here you already have your bearish confirmation candle, right? Expecting that price is actually going to sell at least down to this support zone, right? So I'd want to go in for a sell, right? I'd want to go in for a sell. You could do instant sell, put your stop loss at around this point here. On gold, you could do instant sell, put your stop loss. You could do an instant sell, put your stop loss at around price level. Okay, I'd want to move that up a little bit in case of a fake out, right? In case of a fake out. So I'd want to put my stop loss at around price level 1899.61. 1899.61. I want to have my stop loss at around that point. Then you could go in for an instant sell and then take your profit before this support zone here. So I'll be targeting take profit around 1892.10. So you could put your take profit before that point, right? Around that point. But before it, you put your take profit at around that point. So that is my preference for gold. And you can see that gold has actually been on a little bit of a downtrend. So there's every possibility that downtrend will continue if the strength of the dollar continues for today, right? If the strength of the dollar continues for today. So that's it for gold on a 15 minutes time frame. Let's look at US 100 also. Let's look at US 100. US 100 on a 1 hour time frame, you could see that US 100 is actually ranging also. Stocks, you're most likely going to be expecting stocks to range up until when the news comes out. So this is stock ranging in between this region, right? This is stock ranging in between this region. So this is on a 1 hour time frame. So I'd want to go into a smaller time frame to get better entries, better and clearer entries to see if there is opportunity for me to key into at around this point. So looking at it on a 15 minutes time frame, let's see. Like I said, US 100 is a volatile instrument and it is quite profitable. it is a volatile instrument and it is quite profitable. So few people on US 100 with a good loss side will still amount to a good amount of money, right? Few people, right, on US 100 will still amount to a good amount of money, right? So for US 100, I'm still expecting price to range in between this point. So that means price would get to my resistance, come down to my support, from my support, go back to my resistance until there is a breakout, right? Until there is a breakout. So you might be looking at trading your breakouts when the news comes out. But for this morning, you might want to trade in between these points. So key into the sell, following price from this rejection point down to this support, right? You could key into the sell, following price from this rejection point down to this support. So I don't want to go in for an instant sell. Of course, have my stop loss above my resistance at around there, right? Once price is able to break above this resistance point, I just count my losses and move on. So I put my stop loss at around price level 14986, 14986.15, 14986.15, 14986.15. I put my stop loss at around that point. Then you could go in for an instant sell down to this support zone here, right? So of course you want to take your profit before the support. You want to take your profit before the support. Have my take profit at around here. So my take profit will be at price level 14909.74, 14909.74, 14909.74, 14909.74. So that's for US 100. That's for US 100. So let's look at US 2000. Like, let's look at US 2000 and then we'll call it a day. That'll be the last instrument we'll be treating for today. So for US 2002, same thing. I'm expecting price to range in between this region, which you see that you started having those short candlesticks, depending on when the news will come out for US 2000. So this is price ranging in between this point. So you could go to a smaller time frame to get opportunities in between that ranging point. And US 2000 is also another volatile instrument. US 2000 is also another very volatile instrument, right? So of course, price is being rejected from this point here. Price is being rejected from this point. So there's every possibility that price will sell down to this support. There's every possibility that price will sell down to this support. You could see the candlestick pattern. You see your inverted hammer, right? You also have your Greystone Doji, right? So all at your resistance point, expecting that price would push down. So I'm going to go in for a sell, right? I'm going to go in for a sell on US 2000 also. A sell on US 2000 also would be in order. A sell on US 2000 also would be in order, right? So you have your stop loss above that resistance point. Have your stop loss. So should price break above that resistance point, right, you just have your stop loss at price level 1884.3, 1884.3, 1884.3. Then of course you're taking your profits down at before the support zone here. So look at where my stop loss is, and then my take profit will be at price level 1872.6, 1872.6, 1872.6. So that's my preference. That's my entries for the instruments we've treated for today. So ensure, like I tell people, when it comes to the money market review, is just to spur you into action, right? As much as possible, also make it an habit of doing your own research. Try to understand how this market works, and that's the only way you could actually make a profit, because you can't keep relying on the entries you get in the morning, right? If you know how the market works, you could do your analysis at any time of the day. Just like if you were awake during the AUD, during that time when the AUD came out, right? You would have been able to make quite a good amount of money for yourself if you knew what to do. If you know how to do basic analysis yourself, you would have keyed into that long sell. You could see that long sell that played out on all the AUD instruments, right? On all the AUD pair. So that's the level at which normally trade would like our clients to attain, right? So just keep up with the trainings, the morning trainings, the evening training, and try to push yourself past your limits, right? Get above your comfort zone, and I can assure you that you would achieve that which you're willing to achieve, right? Or that which you've been eyeing for a long time, you'd be able to achieve that. Right. It's nice having you guys. Do have a wonderful day. We'll meet again in another edition of the Morning Market Review.